Good evening. Fall River Community Media, FRC Media, along with our online community news resource, FRC Media News, are pleased to sponsor tonight's forum featuring the candidates running for Fall River City Council. My name is Keith Tebow, Director of FRC Media, and I will serve as moderator for tonight's event. This is the second of two City Council forums that we have held tonight. You'll soon be able to see a replay of tonight's first forum on FRC TV Channel 95, as well as our websites frmedia.org and frcmedianews.org. All candidates were invited to participate, and the makeup of our two panels were determined by a drawing. Here are the candidates joining us for our second panel. In alphabetical order: Ronald Cabral, Sean Cadeen, Joseph Camara, Stephen Camara, Michelle Dion, Trot Joseph Lee, Stephen Long, and Leo Pelletier. Candidate Brad Kilby had intended to join us tonight. Unfortunately, he had an emergency and sends his regrets for not being able to join the forum this evening. Also joining us tonight is a panel of journalists who will be asking questions of the candidates. They are Donna Mata, Editor-in-Chief of FRC Media News, Michael Holtzman of the Herald News, and Pam Martin of Fall River Government Television. Thank you for joining us. The format of tonight's forum is as follows. Our forum will last 90 minutes. There will be no opening statements, but each candidate will be allowed a 90-second closing statement. Each candidate will answer every question posed by our panelists and will have 90 seconds to answer each question. There will be no rebuttals. Prior to each question, we will randomly draw a candidate's name, and that candidate will respond to the question first. We will then go around the panel so each candidate has an opportunity to answer the question. Candidates will only be asked to answer a question first once. In the event that all candidates were not selected to answer a question, there will be another drawing from those remaining to select a candidate who will offer his or her closing statement first. So let's get started. Our first question will be asked by Donna Mata of FRC Media News, and it will be answered first by Michelle Dion. Donna.
In a bid to improve the image of the city, the current administration has unveiled basically a campaign to market the city. Do you think that was money well spent? If not, why? And if so, why?
I would say that it's money well spent in the event that it does accomplish its goal, that it does move the city forward, that ultimately we're able to rebrand ourselves in a manner that puts Fall River in a positive light and puts us in the proper direction for economic development, for tourism, for things that would benefit our city and cause us to prosper so that we could be more independent than we are financially today.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Many candidates, mayor and city council in 2015, ran on economic development, promoted themselves as businessmen, and that mentality of our government being run as a business can go a little too far sometimes. I didn't agree with the marketing campaign because there were better ways that we could have marketed ourselves without spending that kind of money. But also on top of that is if we go too far in the pendulum of running our government as a business, we forget that the specific characteristics of businesses that need to be done to run, they have a opportunity to make profits. They have to reinvest those profits in order to continue making their business run. In government, if we don't have enough money, we don't have the same options as business. We have to then raise taxes and raise fees and do that in order to keep our business running in the government side. So I think that mentality went a little too far with the marketing thing. We have to put our city in a position to succeed tangibly before we market the city in a specific kind of way.
Thank you. Mr. Long.
I was honored to serve on that branding initiative campaign and that committee. It was a very diverse committee of business people, educators, and some political people to put a better image on the city. The mayor kind of honed it down to that we need to tell our story, and the story is a very positive story that's going on in the city of Fall River. We're doing many positive things. And it gets me tired when you hear people from the city be negative about our city. It bothers me. And I think it's an issue that we need to address and we have to take serious. You know, we have to project a positive image to all the communities around us and even outside of our state. And you can tell when we look at the industrial park, which right now is about 95% complete and full. You can see the things that are going on the waterfront, down the south end, up in the north end. There's a lot going on in the city, very positive. And when we say make it here, that means a lot in many different ways. So I think it was money well spent, and I think we should keep doing those types of projects.
Thank you. Mr. Pelletier.
Thank you. Any money that we spend, as long as we don't overspend, to show that the image of Fall River is good, but we don't want to take it from fire, police, and so on. But you know, the image of Fall River is starting to get a lot better with the waterfront. This week, you got Market Basket up there. Beautiful. And that brings up the image of the city as well. And as far as spending money, I mean, as long as they cool it down, you know, taxes are high enough. I mean, if you get a grant, that's one thing. So you got to be careful how you're spending the money. But I think the image of Fall River is starting to come up a couple of notches. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cabral.
I attended that event at Make It Here. I lived in the city all my life, and I think having Fall River Celebrates Mayor a couple years ago, when I did a logo for Harris State Park, big honor for me in the city. But we're always spending money foolishly, and I think we got to do something for our community, working with the business owners. We have Amazon. Hopefully have a good event in the future, and I'm planning to work with colleagues like we elected on City Council.
Thank you. Mr. Kadim.
Thank you. From my standpoint, I don't know that the concept itself was necessarily wrong. I agree that the city had to or should rebrand its image. I think it's important for us to redefine the city of Fall River and change the perception. However, in order to do that, I think there's a place that we need to start, and I think we were a little premature with the branding itself. I think before we do that, we need to know where we're going. We need to have a master plan. I think we should have, number one, updated a master plan, had a little bit more strategic planning in terms of when it comes to tourism, economic development. When we look at just medical zoning, you know, we're just looking at zoning in general. What do we want to see from a city or as a city? And I think there's a lot of input that needs to come from residents, from the business community. So I think that should have taken place before we spend $50,000 on a branding image. And I think Make It Here and doesn't really speak to what Fall River is about. And I think we could have done a lot better job on coming up with a branding initiative that really sold the city of Fall River and spoke to our cultural diversity and what we really have to offer.
Thank you. Mr. Joseph Camara.
Thank you. You know, anything we can do to promote our city is a plus for our city. You know, we need to market our city and promote all the positives that we have in the city. We don't promote the Battleship, the waterfront, the Iwo Jima Memorial. We don't promote those things enough. People from outside this community, when they come here for the first time and they walk along our waterfront and they see that beautiful monument and they see the Battleship and then they work their way into the Marine Museum and they say to themselves, wow, we never realized Fall River had this. So it's something that we need to do. It's a beginning. It's a plus. Will we ever see the result of whether it's worth the money we're spending or not? That's tough to gauge, but it's a start and it's a plus. And years from now, when we see more people visiting our restaurants, we don't promote the restaurants enough. People from outside this community that come to the restaurants and see the benefit that they get, the fabulous food, the diversity and all of what they can get at the prices they're going to pay compared to other communities, Boston and Providence, it's a big, big plus. So we have some wonderful things in our city that we need to promote them, because if we don't promote them from within, then who's going to come and promote them for us? So it's something that I agree with. And will we ever see the results of what it's going to turn back? Years, maybe we will. We'll never know. But I mean, if we see more people coming here, then we'll know that we did see positive results. Thank you.
Steve Camara.
Well, Make It Here is really the product that we bought. And the concept is a good one. Make it here, whether you're a family that's trying to earn a living and keep the kids well clothed and well educated, you can make it here. it's also something that can be used to talk about the kinds of products that are made here, whether it's Matuk in the airport area, in our industrial park that's making linens for bedding, or whether it's Fall River Shirt on Alden Street, where the manufacturing firm is making it here and selling it throughout the United States, whether it's a growing piece of the textile industry that's happening now. So I think the theme is good, and I think what we need to do now is expand upon that theme. I think utilizing our high schools in particular and our junior college, community college and UMass Dartmouth, and getting the students to expand on what it means to make it here would be a good way to go as we expand. And at much less cost. Students love to do this kind of thing, and we've got a resource of students throughout the community that can really make it here. So I think it's a good thing from which we build, and the expenditure is an expenditure that got it started, but we need to move from here.
Thank you. Next question will be asked by Michael Holzman of the Herald News. And the question will go to, first, Leo Pelletier. Michael.
Of the City Council's 10 standing committees, what committee would you like to lead or play a prominent role with, and why? What experiences and education would you bring, and what might you propose changing? And by the way, 2 of the committees, Economic Development and Tourism and Health and Environmental Affairs, have now met once in 2017, according to the City Council, City Clerk's office.
Mr. Pelletier.
Thank you. As you know, I was on the council before, and I ran the real estate committee for many years. And if I go back, that's one thing that I like to do is get back on the real estate committee. As you know, we sold many parcels of land. A lot of the schools here in the city of Fall River, some we actually gave away, and others we got a good piece of change from. One school we sold for $225,000, and Truesdale walk-in center bought a piece off us as well, and we sold that piece and a piece to the housing for $25,000. And me as the chairperson, I was told the land was worth $250,000, but I knew it was underneath the ground, a bunch of tanks. And like I told them, I says, it's all yours. You want it for $25,000. My committee agreed, and then we sold it for $25,000. The doctors come back on us, said it cost them $500,000 to clean this up, and they weren't too happy. So I'd like to be part of that once again.
Thank you. Mr. Cabral.
On the Public Safety Committee, even though I work at the crossing guard in the city of Fall River, a lot of crimes going on in the neighborhood, and I see it every day. I see our public safety, our fire and police. I want to make sure they're safe and our residents are safe in our city of Fall River. So it's all about the community, and I would like to chair the Public Safety Committee and maybe that common development in the city or real estate. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kadeen.
Thank you. I would like to continue to chair the Committee on Finance. I think that happens to be one of my strong suits. My education is a background in finance. I have some unique experience with regards to being the city administrator for the city of Fall River, and then also currently as town administrator for the town of Seekonk. So I think my expertise lends itself well to that committee, bringing both a understanding of government, the way government functions, but also keeping a financial mindset. And in terms of changes that would be made to the second part of your question, I think what I'd like to see is too often councilors and my colleagues have often brought this up is that we refer way too much of our discussions to Finance Committee, which then creates situations where other committees, which are very, very important, are not meeting. And I think a function of that is because councilors want to have the opportunity to have a say in them. And when they go to committee, they may not necessarily have that opportunity because they're not part of a committee. But I think if we can change the ordinances that will allow certain councilors, even though they're not on a committee, a voice without having an open meeting law violation. I think that would be a big improvement and allow us to really send some of these other resolutions or orders to committees that make sense, whether it's economic development, tourism, health and human services. But currently what we're seeing is everything funneling over into finance.
Thank you. Joseph Camara?
Yeah, well, during my tenure on the council, I think I've served on practically every committee. So I enjoy all the committees. Finance in particular is a committee that I wouldn't mind serving, as I have in the past, and I think we did some wonderful things there. The city's finances have always been in place, and we've done very well. As far as some of the committees not meeting, for instance, Environmental Affairs, well, that's a committee that gets very few items referred into that committee, and some of the items that are in that committee, there's just no need to be discussing those items. They don't particularly pertain to the city council. They just get referred there as a matter of, let's put this here for now, but there's really no urgency to discuss those issues with all the other issues that we have before us. Years ago, the Environmental Affairs Committee was extremely busy committee when we had BFI up at the landfill and we had all that going on. That committee saw a lot of action. When we had the problems that we're having down at the waterfront, well, not the waterfront, the sewer treatment plant, Environmental Committee years ago was very busy. We don't get those. We've made the adjustments and the corrections in those areas, so you don't get a lot of referrals into the Environmental Committee as you used to in the past. Everything, as the council stated, does get referred to Finance Committee, and the reason is all the councils are able to participate in the Finance Committee, so regardless of how much relevance it has to the financing, it seems to be a place, a safe haven to go, so that all the councils can discuss the issue, bat it out, without there being a threat of open meeting law violations by council participating and that type of thing. So I don't mind serving. When I'm on a committee, I do my research, I do all the studying. What I would like to see...
Thank you.
All right.
Stephen Camara.
Well, my colleague, Joseph Camara, just made a point that committees meet as often as they have information to serve. But to correct Mr. Holtzman, as the chairman of Health and Environmental Affairs, we've met on several occasions this year. We first met right here at Bristol Community College on Earth Day, and we met to talk about sustainability issues and how can we make the planet a more sustainable place. And we were enriched by not only the work that's being done by the city government in order to reduce energy cost, but we were also enriched by what happens right here at Bristol Community College with the many classes that are held, many of them open to the community, for sustainability. So we did meet in April to talk about sustainability. We also met this past, this month on another very interesting but not necessarily glamorous issue, feral cats. There are 100,000 plus cats around this city, and there are so many people that are working to make sure that these four-legged creatures, these lovely creatures who provide us with so much love, are providing also some health services through the many agencies that exist. And we are meeting on November 1st at 4 p.m. To discuss the Alfred J. Lima Cocoshan River Rail Trail, with a particular eye toward making sure that the integrity of that trail remains and that no roads are constructed in order to destroy that rail. So our Health and Environmental Affairs Committee meets regularly.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
I would like to be involved with and sit on the Committee for Youth and Elder Affairs. Both our youth and elders have issues that are specific to both groups. I believe that the youth can help the elders and the elders can help the youth. They need to feel that there's someone out there that advocates for them. They need to feel that they aren't being left behind. As I've gone from high-rise to high-rise, very often the elders do comment on they don't have support. They don't have people come visit them to listen to their concerns and their problems. And we all know that the baby boomers are the largest group of people in this country, and we are getting older. And eventually there is going to be a very large elder population that we'll need to deal with. And maybe if we start now with the elders, we'll have some solutions moving forward. I also believe that the youth also need to feel that there are people in place for them. We do have a youth violence group, but we have many issues. We have, we have children that are homeless. We have children that are being bullied. We have youth that are suffering from different forms of violence. And I don't think our committee is,
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
It's a good question, by the way. Just wanted to point that out. I wanted to answer a specific question about qualifications. My master's degree is in social work. I have a license. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have 2 jobs where I work with teens who have behavior problems, specific diagnoses that contribute to their behavior problems, let's just say. And just bouncing off of the what Ms. Dion was talking about, youth and elder services, I feel like I would be specifically qualified for that type of department or subcommittee. And also human services overall. I feel like those would be the 2 major places that I am specifically educationally qualified to be a contributor to. But I'm also a 9-year veteran, and there are liaisons where you have an outlet for veterans as well. And specifically for me, I want to make sure that I stay connected to my communities. So I would like to be a liaison to all the neighborhood associations the best I can. I think that's where a lot of problems can be heard and starting to resolve from that baseline. Speaking of elderly as well, we all go to the high rises during campaign season. We hear many times that there's safety concerns in these high rises and in these housing areas. We can take care of that as well, help take care of
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Long.
I am the chair of the Economic Development Committee, and because of the situation that developed over the last term, I didn't think it was wise to add any kind of fodder to that situation, and there was nothing to be accomplished by having meetings until that was resolved. One of the things I want to say about it is that committees meetings need to mean something to be effective. It seems to me that the Finance Committee at this point has been the committee that handles basically every issue. We go to committee, we have a committee hearing. I've been on real estate. We go back to the Finance Committee. We rehash and rehear the whole committee meeting all over again. And it makes me wonder if the committees are even that effective. And I think we need to have not only the meetings, but they have to be effective, but we also have to have a confidence in the people that serve on those committees to come to effective reasoning and come with their recommendations to the council. I don't particularly care, and I wish we could get away from the confrontational politics that happens within the chamber. While we may disagree, we still have to do the business of the city. And it just seems like we just prolong these debates forever, and we really never come up with an answer at the end. So, as far as committees are concerned, I would recommend that the new president give the committees the ability to meet, come to a resolution, and then push that resolution once it gets to the council to make sure that we've reheard it and done it. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam Martin is next with our next question for our candidates tonight. And this question will be answered first by Stephen Long. Pam.
I want to talk a little bit about vandalism, tagging, whatever you want to call it. So twice in 1 week, we saw the Iwo Jima monument be tagged or vandalized. We also saw the Quokasham Rail Trail, I think it was open maybe a week, and we had tagging happen over there as well. So security cameras might seem an obvious answer. How do we pay for it? And kind of flash back for a second now and think you're standing beside that kid, that teen, that young person, whoever. What would you say to them to make them stop tagging or vandalizing our public property?
Mr. Long.
Well, that's a twofold question. I think the first thing we have to do is we have to have the enforcement where we have to be able to catch them. I know that the individuals that vandalized the Iwo Jima Memorial were caught. And that's a good thing. But I think it's an opportunity for 2 things: to tell them, educate them what that monument stands for, and number 2 is that it's not right to damage public property. I was a mischievous child when I was a kid, like we all were, and luckily I had enough people around me to educate me to tell you this is right, this is wrong, and making sure you understand the differences between that. So I think it's a twofold question. It's enforcement. Making sure we protect our monuments and protect our city. But the other side of it is once we catch them, is use it as an opportunity to educate them on what is the proper way to respect our city.
Thank you. Mr. Pelletier.
Oh, I'm next. I didn't know. You know, you go throughout the city of Fall River and you see all the graffiti. It's unbelievable. Somebody's got to see. Some of them things take 20 minutes to make, and nobody's seen them. Everybody's got a cell phone. Everybody's got a camera on their cell phone. Maybe they don't know how to use it. Take a picture. Turn them in. The city looks awful. We talk about the image of the city of Fall River. And how much more can the police department do? They can't do it all. It depends on the people of Fall River to help out and to say, hey, they're tagging this, they're tagging that. Take a picture and turn them in. That's it. And that's the only way the city is going to get better. A lot of these kids got no respect for other people's property. It's a shame. That's what's coming up, and that's what we're bringing up. It's not right, but that's what we should do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cabral.
I read that in the Herald News around Lake when you vandalized property. I'm glad that people got caught. But educate these kids and teach about the arts. And we have to do something in our community. When you see in the parks and you see the gang symbols, it's a new generation. And these kids today have to think about us. We're the future of whoever's be the next city council. But stand up with them and teach them what to do and not respect. When I was growing up, if we did something like that, we'd get in trouble. But proper protocols. And I will help these kids and the youth. That's our future of our city.
Mr. Kadeen.
Thank you. So the question was, what would we say to the youth or the individuals doing that? Number one, I would ask them to have a little bit more respect and pride for the city of Fall River, and I think that we all want to see that when it comes to littering. I mean, just to see the fact that people just dispense of their trash like it's nothing truly bothers me, and I think it bothers a lot of hard-working residents of Fall River. And also trying to point out to the fact that there's a lot of time, effort, and investment into property that's being done. Now, in terms of the vandalism of the memorial, that's criminal. And to me, I think we need to do a better job of policing that from whether it's our police department or just internally with our residents. In terms of tagging, that's a form of art to some individuals, and I think we need to start looking at other outlets for those individuals who want to perform art and kind of showcase that type of tagging and get them into a specific area so that they're not going to public buildings and tagging various property. So that we can channel that artistic drawing. And we've tried to do that in the past, the City Council and prior administrations with murals, city murals, to allow those individuals to express themselves, whether it's on the overpass or on walls of vacant buildings. With the Building Blocks program, we've discussed that. So I think we need to look at what the root cause of this is, and try to figure out how we can correct it. And I think a lot of it is trying to have an outlet for some of these individuals.
Thank you. Joseph Camara.
Thank you. I think that Councilor Kadim was looking at my notes because they're very similar to exactly what he said. It is sad when this happens. It is a lack of respect. And I think if you look at places like Providence, Rhode Island, when you're driving up into 195, before you get to East Providence, you'll see sailboats on the walls on both sides. And it is a nice, beautiful mural. Other towns, Boston does it as well. They'll take a building, the lower half of the building, the first 15, 20 feet, and they'll put all kinds of artwork. Because one thing about artists and taggers, they won't tag someone else's artwork. They won't tag memorial stuff. We have a monument down at the waterfront that's been there from, I believe it's Mr. Medeiros, I believe, that was there for the last 20 years. It's never been tagged because it's a memorial monument. Just like Iwo Jima, obviously these people were just reckless in what they did, and they don't respect the laws of what those people do. But they do have some guidelines as to other people's arts that they won't affect. And then as far as what we should do to them is make them do community service, make them realize what they did and how bad it is, and make them do hours and hours of community service to pay back for what they did, make it wrong.
Thank you. Stephen Camara.
Well, the cause is deep. We don't have now the kind of family structure. We don't have the activity of the churches and the religious community, nor do we have the kind of community activities that should exist in order to channel our youth in the right direction. So we have a systematic problem, and a systematic problem that goes far beyond the capability of any city council to respond to. But all of us, as members of community, and as members of churches, and as members of neighborhoods, need to do what we can to advance a better place kids so that they are not channeled into the wrong place. I think as we approach this too with punishment, that we need to understand that punishment is something that really doesn't work that effectively, but community service does. So if someone is caught doing some vandalism, they need to understand, for instance, what does that Iwo Jima memorial mean? Or what does that damage to a person's property mean? And that respect needs to be brought back. So it's a matter of RESPECT, and there's not enough of that, and all of us need to work together to try to bring back that kind of respect for community, for family, and for all of those elements that make our community a great community.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
Many of our youth today have not been taught respect. They don't have self-respect, and therefore don't consider their actions as wrong or detrimental, because nothing holds value for them. More often than not, when people are held responsible and they take ownership of their actions, it generally will change their attitude. And in the case of the Iwo Jima monument, perhaps if somebody explained to them the purpose of that monument, why it was there, maybe if you brought them to the Veterans Center and they could meet these people who have lost limbs, who have lost family members, who have lost people that they know have lost lives, it might teach them and show them that life has a value. These things, these are here because of that, and because people before them have put their life down for them. You know, very often, you know, they say ignorance is bliss. If you're ignorant to a situation, you can't understand the depth of what's before you.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
I think coming down on the kids or whoever it is that's doing vandalism, that could have a reverse effect and maybe encourage kids to do more. Kids do a lot of things for attention or acting out or handling a problem that they may have, or they just maybe have the need to express themselves artistically. There's several different ways that they can be talked to in this situation. But I think the most productive way is to let somebody know, hey, this meant something to me, that this meant something to us. Has anything ever meant anything to you and they've damaged it? How do you feel about that? And have a real discussion with them and let them understand the importance of taking care of things rather than just, you did something wrong, you're gonna go out into the community now and clean up everything. I mean, you can do those things and it can have an effect, but there's gotta be a little bit more. And there's, like Mr. Steve Kamara said, there's something systemic going on there. So I think we can have a conversation with the kids and talk to them about it and find not just one outlet or two outlets that's a mural, but something that's consistent and engaging. And I think that's part of the reason why we have a lot of scattered activity going on around the city when it comes to the youth, because there's not a consistent effort or consistent engagement. The other piece too is if anyone ever looks at the pie charts in the budgets, you'll see that there's a very small slither for community maintenance overall, and I think that's something to talk about as well.
Thank you. Back to Donna Mata for our next question, and this question will be answered first by Stephen Kamara.
Steve, the average Fall River resident doesn't necessarily understand at times why taxes have to be raised. For example, the ballot question with the CSOs is coming up, and that's a $123 million loan order. It also addresses other antiquated operations at the treatment plant in the city. As a city councilor, well, you're currently one, but as a city councilor, how do you explain that maybe it's a good idea to say yes to raising taxes when you know it's good for the betterment of the city and the budget as a whole?
Well, the people of Fall River really should be commended because they historically have been supportive of bond issues that have been put on the ballot, and they have been supportive of their community. We have actually a relatively lower tax burden than most communities in Massachusetts. And I think people realize that. Fall River is a very desirable place to live, and for many reasons, but particularly because of the cost of living that exists here, which is a lower cost of living that exists in other comparable, and I'm talking about urban communities. So I think that's the key, an educational campaign that speaks to the benefits that come from the expenditure of our tax dollars, and in the case of the CSO project, what that means and what it might mean in terms of preventing lawsuits for not doing what that requires us to do. So the people of Fall River, I think, should be commended. I remember when Proposition 2.5 passed, and Fall River had a particular vote, and so did Cambridge. And people were saying, well, Cambridge voted that way because they're intellectual, and Fall River voted that way because they didn't know what they were voting for. I think people underestimate the intelligence of the Fall River voters. People know what they want, and they vote accordingly. And I think if you present a reasonable plan to the voters, they will support it.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
More often than not, taxpayers will accept increases if there's something tangible that they're getting in return for their money. They find it much more difficult when they don't see the tangible, when they don't feel it. I would like to compare the CSO project to owning your own home, in a sense. Everything has a useful life. In our own homes, our furnaces break, we need to replace them. Our water tanks break, we need to replace them. Well, the CSO project will be replacing outdated equipment. We have equipment that's back from 1975. We have an obligation to invest in our community when it comes to these things, because we want to be able to continue to go to our faucet, turn it on, and have clean water come out of it. I believe there should be a limit to the amount expected from the community. I think our federal delegation owes us a hand in some of it. They've mandated it, and I think their feet should be held to the fire to help us. But the reality is everything goes up. Cost of living, things, like, as I said, need to be replaced or repaired, and unfortunately, that has to come out of our pocket.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
If you compare taxation to stealing, they're almost very similar to each other, right? I mean, it's taken away from you without you even really having a say in it. It's being used in different programs that you may not want it to be put into. So in many cases, taxation is a burden on us, and it's been this way since the beginning of our country, and probably since the beginning of government. And it's the worst. It's one of the worst things that we have to take on as citizens in the city and in the country. When this CSO project was presented to us, we were told immediately that this needs to be paid for or else. This needs to be paid for or else. How many budgets has some of these councils passed where this budget needs to be passed or else, and your back is against the wall? The presentation of this was just unfortunate. At the same time, if the numbers are right, and I've been looking over this heavily, this is something we're going to have to pay for, unfortunately, and so our backs are against the wall. And I would vote yes to this as well, because we don't want to be in a worse situation. But at the same time, like, it's awful. It's really bad that the sins of the past have put us in this position that we actually have to pay for this now.
Thank you. Mr. Long.
The sins of the past have caught up with us. When Proposition 2.5 was initiated, the Fall River's tax rate was extremely low, and we've never really caught up. It's very, very difficult. But I would look at what I have a problem with is as the taxes go up, and they will go up. I'm not a real fan of more fees. The fees are the ones that come back after you. It's on top of your taxes. If it's in taxes, as I myself am a homeowner, I get a little bit of a break because I can take that off my income taxes. But the fees, I can't. Where businesses and even investors can use that as a business expense, I can't write those fees off. I don't get anything for those fees except the services that are rendered. But I do agree that the people of Fall River are intelligent enough to understand that if they're paying taxes, they want to see something for it. And I think over the last couple of years, they have seen it. They've seen new fire, new police. They've seen the road construction. And I think with that, they're not, nobody likes to pay taxes, but I think they understand that they do have to pay it, but they want to see something for that effort. And it's always difficult, but you know, we want police, we want fire, we want potholes fixed, we want good streets, and that costs money, and so that's what it's about.
Thank you. Mr. Pelletier.
Yes, this is a valid question that not too many people has talked about, but the 122 million that they need, 50 for the waste treatment plant to fix, 46 for the CSO plan that should almost finish it, 8 million for the pumping station, 2 pumping stations out of 15 to be fixed, 15 million for flood control project out of this. So what do? We bond for the money or we don't? Now, the EPA comes in and says, if you don't do it, you'll be fine. Not only that, the EPA will charge $88 million on top of this if you don't do what they want to get rid of the nutrient in the water. So that's what we're faced with. It's going to end up being 211. And the people of Fall River is going to understand that if they don't go for this 123, they're going to end up forcing us to pay $211 million. So that's something that they should understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cabral.
I would vote yes on this because I think it's well Western question. We always raise taxes, and I don't like raising taxes in the city of Florida. We always raise taxes. But I have the back to the wall, and the ballot question is well there, and I look forward to read the questions in the next 2 weeks. Thank you.
Mr. Kadeen.
Thank you. I think the average resident in Fall River understands the need for taxation and fees. When you look at government, that's the only way we get our revenue. It's taxes, fees, and state aid. And state aid is just another form of taxes at the state level. So when we start looking at the money coming in to balance the budget and the services that we require, I think the residents of Fall River are okay with that as long as they can see a tangible improvement in the quality of services that they're providing. The infrastructure is improving. They will support that, and they have proven that in the past. When you look at the CSO, we're talking about $123 million. That doesn't include the infrastructure that we have to do with all the pipelines. My colleague to my left here has been very vocal about that and ensuring that we replace our water mains and has been part of that project. We're on, I believe we're on phase 13 or 14, so for 14 years we've been doing this. We have to talk about the other post-employment benefits. That's a $500 million unfunded liability that we have to address. We're talking about a new Durfee High School being built at $250 million, which is absolutely needed. We're talking about infrastructure improvements that we rely on Chapter 90 to come in that only provides $3 million. And when you look at potholes and the state of our roadways, we need more money than that. And we haven't even talked about public safety staffing levels and the other staffing levels in city government or education funding that we need to provide for the services. So if we can show that we have a strategic plan, that we're planning for the future, I think the residents of Fall River understand that.
Thank you.
And they
Thank you.
it.
Joseph Camara.
Well, thank you. You know, I do agree that most residents do recognize and realize that taxes are going to go up. It's something where prices, unfortunately, don't come down. The expense of doing business continues to go up. The CSO project, when we were first ordered to do that, the federal government used to subsidize quite a bit of it. And then they did what they do best. They abandoned cities and towns like Fall River. They walked away from that project, and they said, we've given you enough, now you have to come up with yourself, the people have to start to pay for it, and it became very difficult. It is one of the major reasons that we can't do a lot more because a lot of our money in the budget goes directly to that CSO project. This $123 million loan order, 7 years from now is when we'll start paying back $200 per cost per average fumes, when the project is complete. Not tomorrow, not next year, not the year after, approximately 7 years from now. And that's, you know, a hefty burden, $200 above what everyone else is paying now for this particular project in itself for the next 20 years. And if we look at what we've done and what the progress we've made by increasing our police department, increasing our fire department, increasing the equipment that they have. We built 10 new schools. We're very fortunate to do that. We're 90% reimbursement from the state, and we're looking to build a new high school. So we're going to have to continue this path of raising, and if we don't have to do it at the full 2.5%, then we won't. But in the meantime, people do understand, and as they drive around and they see the infrastructure improvement and everything else, they do feel that they are getting their money's worth from the people that I talk to on a regular basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Holzman will have our next question, and the question will be directed first to Ronald Cabral. Mike, the microphone, thank you.
Sorry. As a city councilor, what do you believe should have been done differently on the council's part so that a proposed road behind the Cloverleaf Mills across the Quikashon Bike Trail would have received better review and maybe not have received unanimous council approval? Do you think what happened was more a function of the council making hurried decisions at the end of late meetings, that the road and lack of explanation was an inside deal cut by the mayor, or something else?
I think it was the inside deal called by the mayor. As a city councilor, I want that road to our bike path. I walk there most every single day. I do a daily walk. I do a lot of walking. And I will be attending November 1st. I received their thing, and they were there last night at the city council meeting. We care about our city. It's a brand-new path, about wildlife, environmental. I think Al Leamer is an awesome person. When I was on the board member of the Flint Neighbor Association, I saw those plans, and it's finally here today. And it's all about our community, and it's a beautiful bike path, and I don't want that road, and I will fight if I make city council to make sure that road's not here.
Thank you. Mr. Kadeen.
Thank you. I don't believe that the city council should have done anything different. It was or presented to the city council as a typical easement. The language was what you see on every single easement, a pass and repass. That's what an easement is. It was for public utilities. So when you start looking at all the easements that the city council has been presented with and has passed, there has never been any easements with roadways presented. So I think the administration has the day-to-day function. That's their form of government. They're the executive branch. They're overseeing this project. The information should have been given to us freely and openly to have that conversation that there is a roadway up there. Without the language saying that the roadway is going into a park, which has just been finished, utilizing state monies, and for the council to be expected to read between some lines with no language there specifically saying there was a roadway in there, and to ask a question, oh, by the way, are you planning on putting a roadway in a linear park that we have just finished with state monies? To me, is unreasonable, because it was a very straightforward easement for public utilities, and it's unfortunate that we didn't receive all the information that we were supposed to.
Thank you. Joseph Camara.
Well, I mean, a year ago, let's face it, the council does have a very lengthy agenda on a lot of nights, and we do discuss a lot of items for an awful long time. It just seems to be that that's the way it is in today's day and age for a number of different reasons. But I can remember a year ago when we were voting on the budget, and some councilors voted for a budget of $250 million, only to find out a few minutes later during a recess that they voted for the entire budget. And they said, well, I would never have voted for this budget. I didn't realize we were voting for this budget. And they had to take a reconsideration to turn it back around, only to not vote for a budget that they had no intention of voting for 10 minutes after they voted for it. It's not the first time that it's happened. I pointed out that one budget, but it's happened on a number of times when the council has taken a vote only to say, well, that's not what we intended to do, so let's reconsider and do it again a different way. So, in this particular night, I mean, look, it was late. I'm not going to say that it was, hurried through or rushed through. We get our agenda. We look at it. We did see it said an easement. I don't believe it did say a road on it, but we could have asked questions. We chose not to. We could have referred it to a committee. Chose not to. There's a number of things that we could have, should have, maybe would have done differently now. And so the important thing is we are going to send it to a committee. We are going to talk about it. We are going to find out who, what, why, when, and where it happened, and how come, and what we need to do to correct it. I don't believe the road's going to go there after everything I've seen and listened to.
Thank you.
I don't see it.
Stephen Camara.
Well, my colleagues have really touched on the reality. The reality is that the order was an administrative order that came to the council without any mention of a road. It talked about pass and repass, and then specifically mentioned for the purpose of providing water and sewerage. And there's no concern raised about water and sewerage because that would be underground and would not disturb a bike path. A road disturbs a bike path. And our initial reaction, and I think the council was right, saying this was not something that should be resolved by the council because it was an administrative order initially. It was sent back to the administration, and the administration was given a timetable, a reasonable timetable of 21 days to have a public meeting, at least to discuss and fully air all the issues. I feel very unfortunately that the 21-day commitment was not met. And so I submitted my own resolution requiring that my Committee on Health and Environmental Affairs meets. And it will meet, again, mentioning November 1st at 4 p.m. at the council chamber, and all parties will be brought to the table. And will be brought to the table with a unified effort, which is to make sure that that bike path is protected and preserved. And I also submitted an order that calls upon a cease and desist to be done if there's any construction anywhere near that bike path in the meantime. So I think we're taking the right steps, and we're doing it post-haste.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
I've attended every city council meeting for almost 5 years. And very often at these meetings, the council will grill people and ask multiple questions, sometimes to the point that you wonder why they're still asking the questions. So to simply let something go by and say, well, because we didn't know this or we didn't know that, to me, I believe that when something is presented, one of the first questions should be, why is this being requested? How will it affect our community? What's the purpose of the request? Is it good for the people? Why are we tearing up something brand new to put in utilities? I think through questioning and those types of questions, ultimately it may have come out that they wanted to put in a road. Do I agree with the road? Absolutely not. Do I think the council would have agreed with the road? I don't think so. I just find it interesting, and maybe it was because they were tired because these meetings go on and on and on. But I find it interesting that they just didn't ask the questions like they normally do.
Thank you. Mr. Lee.
There are very likely a lot of parents in this room. When I watched the city council meetings, I compared a lot of, especially over the past 2 years, but basically over the past 5 years as well. When I compared the council and the mayor going at each other, I compared it to two children arguing and yelling at each other, because that's almost literally what it is in many cases. And there's been a consistent pattern of we passed this, oh wait, no, we didn't mean to do that, we're blaming the mayor now. $2 million, almost a $2 million cut was to the budget. It resulted in some problems with public safety, and then the next thing you know, it's the mayor did this, and public safety is the most important thing. We have to, when I see two kids arguing, I have to put them both to the side and say, what's your part in this, and what's your part in this? Councilor Kadim, President Kadim, was 100% correct. There was no word road in that. So the mayor holds that responsibility. But then I believe as president and as the rest of the council, as Ms. Dion said, they have a responsibility to grill and ask the questions. They can't be selective. I've seen so many times they've grilled over hundreds of dollars or $10,000, but then leave $1 million thing alone. So it was a selective situation where they didn't choose to grill this easement, and they didn't get they let it go by basically. But they had the opportunity and they had the responsibility, and they didn't take it.
Thank you. Mr. Long.
Well, I think everybody knows the story on this. Yeah, we did have an easement that came down, and people say there was no word for the road, but there was also no map. We didn't have the map, or we didn't have any word of road. And earlier, when I did some research after the fact, there was always the road was mentioned. So I'm not sure if we talk about who drafted it, whatever. I'm not going to beat that. But I want to commend Brian Pearson and the Bike Advocates for doing a lot of research on it. and I believe that that road's not going to be committed. But one of the things that I learned from this, and you have to learn from mistakes, and I learned from this mistake, is the only question that should have been asked at that night was, with this easement, who would benefit from that easement, and how would they benefit from the easement? And if that question would have been asked, we would have had it answered, and it's a simple question. So going forward, when we look at these things, the easement was an easement that's basically tagged into every real estate transaction that has an easement like that for utilities to pass and repass. It was a simple administrative order, as they've said. But I think the questions need to be asked going forward is who benefits and how. And going forward, when I see those types of orders come down, those are the questions that I'll be asking.
Mr. Pelletier.
Thank you. A couple of years ago, I had voted for this, a no-brainer. $8.5 million, the city chip in some money, get a nice bike path, beautiful. And when you think about it, you gotta have a road go through there. I mean, there's kids there, there's bikes there. It doesn't make any sense. And the mayor insists there will be no road there. And I'm hoping that he's true to his saying there'll be no road there. Whether it's gonna go to court, I don't know. It probably end up in court. But that company itself should say, hey, listen, this is a hot potato. Let's give in. Let's give the bike path, and not another driveway for them. So we'll see what happens with that. We depend on the mayor now. Thank you.
Thank you. Pam Martin has our next question for our candidates, and it will be answered first by Track Joseph Lee.
On a national level, we're confronted daily with stories about violence, racism, sexual harassment. Do you think Fall River is a friendly city, and what will you do to spread kindness, particularly to kids?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that Fall River is like many cities where we have the potential to be great in many of the areas that you were asking about, as far as combating violence and sexism and things like that. We have hundreds and thousands of people in the city. You can go on social media just as one outlet, full of people that are trying to spread positive messages, care about each other, rebel against what they see in the media. So I think that we have the potential to be great at this, but we have a lot of work to do. Because you can flip the side over and see that there's a lot of contempt. There's a lot of people that, feel as though they've been violated and they deserve justice or something to that nature, whether it's sexism or racism or anything like that. And they have a voice and they have a right to express that. So as a city councilor, what would I say to kids is, look at the positives. How do you feel when you see the positives? And how do you feel when you see the negatives? And which one is going to be more appealing to you as you grow and become a teenager or when you're in school? How do you want to be treated? So once we get to that basic element of treating others the way I want to be treated, and get the kids thinking in that concept, I think there's going to be a natural inclination to say, I want to be treated good, and I think I'm going to treat others good. But consistent engagement when it comes to kids is the most important thing, consistency.
Thank you. Mr. Long.
A great question. I think we have to get back to where words and actions mean something. Our children are bombarded every day through the media, through music, through just our politics, where everything is confrontational. Everything they see is confrontational, violence, and it's just, even in their video games. And I get that, where it's entertainment, but we need to teach them that there's a wall between that entertainment and reality. And I think leadership really takes a role in this, where we have to teach our children through our words and our actions, where we choose them wisely, and how we interact with each other. That we can have discussion and we can have debate, and it doesn't have to be an argument. It can just be a rational discussion of the issue. And even if we don't agree, we can show them that we can have those discussions without getting too emotional and becoming out of control. And I think it's really about having self-control, that we don't live in the instant gratification world, that it takes time to develop relationships, those types of things. And I think that's true leadership, both as if you're a parent or even if you're politics, whatever it is, if you're in a position for them to look up to, that's an obligation. It's an obligation for all adult people to show that to our children.
Thank you. Mr. Pelletier.
I guess there's a lot of violence out there with kids and everything else, but what can I do? What can anybody do? But ask the parents, hey, I mean, educate the kids. Violence is out there. Try to control your kids, and most of that stuff should come from the family. As far as being on a council, I've always been nice to everybody, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be nice to me, you know. But I think it belongs at home. That's where it starts. That's where it should be. And anything worse than that, they're going to end up where my part-time job was, in the prison. And the parents ought to realize that. And that's not a place to be, let me tell you. So they ought to smarten up. With that, I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Cabral.
Great question. It's true I'm media, and we have to teach our children if they want to go to jail. But that's our future of our city. When the kids give me a high five every day at school, those kids are my future. Those are future leaders in our city, especially the young ones, when they give you a high five and they tell you their day in school. But I'm ready to lead and roll up my sleeves for the families and help the city of Fall River.
Thank you. Mr. Kadim.
So the question is whether or not Fall River is a kind city. And I think by just human nature, we're all kind. And I think it shows in times of tragedy, whether it's the Boston bombing or 9/11, we come together as a community to help and support each other. So I think what we see is a vocal minority projecting themselves with the negativity that we have. We see it on Facebook, we see it on social media, we see it taking place on the council chamber, where people don't agree with necessary politics and they're grown adults making statements using vulgar language. We need to be role models for our children and for the future. I have conversations with my children every single day. Treat others the way you want to be treated. There are consequences for actions. We need to just come together as a group. We've lost, as Councilor Stephen Kamara had mentioned, we've lost that community feel. When I grew up, it was a neighborhood. We had community schools. It wasn't just our parents that we were afraid of. We were afraid of Mr. Smith and Mrs. Smith finding out if we were doing something bad because there was a telephone call to our house. So I think overall, Fall River is a kind community. I think we need to start putting our foot down with the vocal minority and that minority that is trying to be negative and influence or infiltrate some negativity in the culture and the way we live in the city of Fall River. And I think that starts with everyone here at the table, leading by example, and everybody in the community, one at a time.
Mr. Joseph Kamara.
Well, I also agree that Fall River is an extremely kind city. And as far as our youth, I think that what I tell kids all the time is you better make smart choices or you better be prepared to face the consequences for your bad choices, because it's all up to you. I think everyone realizes right from wrong at all ages. And I think one of the keys that I've always taught my children to do is participate in sports, in the arts and music, learn how to do different things. I've coached youth soccer teams, baseball teams, Little League, basketball teams, CYO, all over, Milliken Junior Silver League. It's now, unfortunately, not as many children are participating. Milliken Silver doesn't exist anymore. CYO still does, but the teams are a lot less. So there's more video game going on in someone's house that they never leave, and they're talking on a wire to someone else who knows where, playing that same video game, and there's no team sport camaraderie. When I was growing up, it's all about play sports, be a team member. You don't have to be the best player on the team. You can be an unsung hero. You can be the one that does all the little things that's going to help that team win, and that's how I grew up, and that's how I teach my children to grow up. And the key is to keep people busy, keep the children busy, keep them engaged, because we know what happens when you see people just hanging out on a corner, any corner somewhere, just wasting time. They're basically just waiting to find trouble. But if they're busy participating in practice, going to this, doing their homework, doing certain things, going to one sporting event after another, they'll be much more
Thank you.
unlikely to get in trouble.
Thank you. Stephen Kamara.
Well, in my life, as a youth and even as an adult, I've been bullied. So I appreciate what it means to be at that end of the spectrum. But I think overall, Fall River is a very much celebrating community. It's celebrating its diversity. But because of my own experiences and my own interest, I went to something called the National Coalition Building Institute, based in Washington, D.C., and learned about working toward a better community through prejudice reduction and diversity training. And I have an acronym that I'm going to try to get through in a minute called SHARED, S-H-A-R-E-D. And I remind people that we have a shared responsibility for each other to overcome S for sexism, discrimination against people based on their gender, the H for homophobia and heterosexism, that LGBTQ community needs to be celebrated along with all of us. A for ageism, that children and adults, particularly seniors, are often victims of discrimination. R for racism and religious-based prejudice, that people are still discriminated against because of their race or their religion. E for ethnicity or economic status or educational level. And finally, the D for disability, and that includes mental and physical disabilities. So as long as we remember we have a shared responsibility for each other and we become allies to all of those groups that are victims of discrimination, we can become a more kind city.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
I believe that it's a nationwide problem. I don't believe people are predominantly born bullies, racists, or evil. I believe that violence and discrimination very often is a learned behavior. Very often, if I'm someplace where there's adults and children, I don't know what age the trigger gets set off, but I'll watch little children, and I very often think to myself, these kids all get along. Everybody's friends. They've never met before, I've never seen each other before, but they're all friends, they're playing, they're having a great time, and the adults in the room are the ones looking around, making the comments, the snide remarks. So obviously, somewhere at some point, something pulls that trigger, and then the behaviors are learned from the adults by the children. And I think adults need to step up to the plate. The adults are the ones that need to learn tolerance and acceptance and be role models for the children so that that trigger isn't pulled.
Thank you. We're going to try to fit in one more round of questions, but we're going to limit the answers to 1 minute, and then we'll go to our closing statements. Our last question will be asked by Donna Mata, and it will be answered by Joseph Camara.
Since we're staying on the positive here, what do you think the current administration is doing well in order to move the city forward, and you as a city councilor or as a potential city councilor would jump on the wagon and support?
Well, I mean, I think the administration put a budget together that increases the police department, increases the fire department, and equips them as well. The IT department also had some new things added to them as well. And I think that public safety is something that we have to focus on. So I think that that's something that he's concentrating on. It's always been an issue in the city. We've always had problems trying to address it. We've had 9C cuts that drastically cut reductions in those departments. And I think that we need to continue to improve those departments and strengthen our city from a public standpoint. I also think that education is very crucial and important as well. And we've taken a track throughout the last 10, 15, 20 years to build new schools. And I think that the biggest school in our city that needs attention right now is the high school. And I think the administration is focusing on building a new high school that's going to continue the trend to educate our children and go further down that road, because those are the keys to a successful community: educated children and safe community for our residents.
Thank you. Stephen Camara.
Yeah, I can be a critic of this administration and I can be an advocate for this administration, but since your question focuses on the positive, I believe that this administration is providing a youthful, energetic look to our city's future. And I think that's good for young people in particular, millennials as they're called, because I see more and more young people willing to take a chance, to open a business, to buy a property, to invest in our community. I'm amazed on Purchase Street, where I've invested significant parts of my life, that places like the Pink Bean and Tequila Lime are full of people every night that are young, vibrant, and exciting. So I think that this mayor has provided that, and along with what my colleague just mentioned, increasing police and fire protection, having a vision relating to streetscapes, reinvesting in our neighborhoods so that we can, in fact, have better places to live in our neighborhoods. So I'm excited about the energy that this administration has brought to our community.
Thank you. Ms. Dion.
I believe that this administration is trying to move in a positive direction. I believe it wants what's best for the city of Fall River. Very often you hear councilors talk about how terrible our streets are, the potholes, how we should be using monies to repair sidewalks, etc. I think that though many say no, streetscapes is something headed in that direction. I attended the majority of public meetings involving streetscapes. In my opinion, it is a plan that makes sense if it's implemented in the way it was presented. They're trying to do it systematically. Most of the streets that have been targeted are due for water line repairs, gas line repairs. They're going to be tearing up the streets. The streetscape money will curb to curb rebuild the streets. They will put in ADA compliant sidewalks, which everybody screams for.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Lee.
Only 1 minute.
1 minute.
The zero-based budgeting concept, in my opinion, is one of the biggest strong points for the mayor. It resulted in I believe, somewhere between $4 to $6 million worth of a surplus or stabilization funding. The school department, they were able to not just meet net school spending, but go above that. I know there was a lot of debate over those numbers and figures, but those are positives that I think he can promote for himself and the city. The first question I was asked tonight was about the branding. Those things, I believe, brand the city more, improving the economy, improving education, improving public safety. And another thing that he's done well, in my opinion, is a multi-pronged approach, not just focusing on one over another, but looking at all the factors and seeing how we can improve those.
Thank you. Mr. Long.
I'd have to agree with some of the people on this board, the financing of the city's zero-based budgeting, and I'm very proud of the association I have with that. And you know, we always talked about hiring from within the city. We have Mary Sahadi there, who is a trained lawyer, CPA. She's a city girl. She grew up in the South End. I've known her since she was 14 years old. She's very qualified in municipal finance, and I think it's a big asset to have her there, which has brought me to this administration and a lot of confidence in the financial picture of the city. I think that's probably the most positive thing that's happened. We have $4.5 million in free cash. I think that's a good thing.
Thank you. Mr. Pelletier.
Thank you. I think the mayor's done all right with putting more police and firemen on. But if we remember the $120 house fee that he got rid of, that was fantastic. Now he's promising everybody in the city of Fall River. Don't know how he's going to do it, but I'm hoping I'm on the city council when it happens to get rid of the purple bags. And right now, I'm telling the mayor, you got my vote, so don't be scared to take the bags out. I yield.
Thank you. Mr. Cabral.
Administration in the positive direction in public safety. We've got more police probably coming in the future. Public safety. We're building our waterfront for the future, so we have more jobs down there in the future, and we have to focus on our future and beyond. And I hope I'm on that council when the mayor or whoever's elected mayor get rid of the purple trash bags, because when I came here, when I was a candidate for another office, I want to get rid of those purple trash bags, because what do you choose? Get rid of those purple trash bags, and I want to see if I can get rid of the purple trash bags, my first priority, and make a resolution to get rid of the purple trash bags.
Thank you. Mr. Kadeen.
I think one of the positive takeaways that I would take away from this administration is just the authority that has been given to department heads to really analyze their departments and advocate for what they feel is needed. Now, I do feel that with that there needs to be a little bit more direction coming from the administration in terms of that, but I think the ability to allow the department heads who manage their departments on a day-to-day basis to have a strong advocating choice or decision or making decisions moving forward with their budgets or the way the services are going to be provided is important, especially coming to the city council and allowing the department heads to be heard at city council meetings as opposed to just having a city administrator or the administration itself representing those directives or objectives and goals coming from those departments.
Thank you. Time now for our closing statements, 90 seconds for each candidate, and we will start with Sean Kadim.
Thank you. 2 years ago, I was honored to be elected as city council. After watching our city government handle finances and spending, I decided that I would seek election to the city council to make sure that our city did not continue to waste taxpayers' money. I continue to believe that the city is not managing taxpayers' dollars 100% properly. My education and experience as a city and town administrator, and my experience as a city council president has equipped me with the expertise in municipal government, which enables me to be the kind of city councilor who can do the job correctly. I am proud to be here today and state that my colleagues and I were able to apply our combined professional experience and skills to ensure accountability. The City Council cut $2 million in questionable revenue, and we minimized the wasteful spending requests from the administration's budget. We have also worked with and advocated for neighborhood groups and causes that needed our support. Most recently, the Alpha J. Lima Quikasham Rail Trail, which is now under threat of being broken into pieces and given to a private business by the present administration. If you want a proactive city councilor, if you want a councilor who will stand up for what is right for you and your family and the city, a city council with the knowledge and experience to find and cut wasteful spending and keep a city budget balanced, then I respectfully ask for your vote for re-election to the city council. With your continued support and vote, I will do the job that it needs to be done, and I will continue to fight and advocate for you and your family.
Thank you. Joseph Camara.
Thank you. First, I want to thank FRC Media, the Herald News, and Fred TV for sponsoring this debate tonight, this forum. I just want to say that 22 years ago, when I was elected to the City Council, I was very fortunate, and the first resolution I passed is a resolution that still stands today. It was an increase in the water rate so that we can begin to reline our decrepit water main pipes that were corroded and needed to be addressed. It was a serious issue. I can remember watching city council meetings where people would storm the chambers with bottles of dirty water. They couldn't wash their clothes. They couldn't drink the water. It needed to be addressed, and I filed a resolution. And to this day, I believe it's the longest-running resolution that's continued every single year. We've replaced 3/4 of the city's water mains, and there's maybe 40 or 50 miles left, I believe, to finish. So I'm very proud of that resolution. It's something that I appreciate all of my colleagues throughout the years that have sat with me there to continue to support that referendum and that resolution. As a lifelong resident of this city, my wife and I have raised our 3 children here. They've all gone through the public school system. They've all done very well. My son is currently a senior at Durfee High School, and I look forward to, as I have in the past, building all those 10 elementary and middle schools to build a new Durfee High School for our community, because they deserve it. The teachers and educators deserve it. And I also want to say that, the past 22 years has been a real eye-opener for me in this being elected. It's been an honor. And on November 7th, I ask for your continued support so that I may continue to make progress in this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Camara.
I am so proud to be a public servant here in this great city of Fall River. I'm honored to serve you. When I first got elected, it was as a school committee member. There was no salary attached to it. It was all about giving back to the community that I love. When I left Durfee High School, I went on and did what I was told to do, which was basically get a good education and come back to your community. I got a bachelor's degree in government from the University of Massachusetts and a master's degree in urban affairs and policy analysis from the New School in New York City. I came back to Fall River, and in my first season after graduation, got right into politics and supported a quality education for every child in the city. Since then, I've been in and out of office on various occasions, but I've always stayed true to my commitment to this community, and I've become a community activist supporting the creation of better, cleaner, and greener parks. I believe that the greatness of Fall River lies in its future, and I believe that all of us together can make that future the best for Fall River, making Fall River New England's next great city. Respectfully, without yard signs and without bumper stickers, I ask you to pass it on that Steve Camara wants to continue to be one of your public servants so that we can make Fall River a better, cleaner, and greener city. Thank you for your support.
Thank you. Michelle Dion.
The decision to run for city council cannot be taken lightly, nor can it be for selfish reasons if one is to be effective in the decision-making process. I believe that as a city councilor, one owes it to the community to address crime, addiction, and all issues that affect our quality of life. We need to support public safety by providing them with the tools and man or woman power necessary to carry out their duties, ensuring not only their safety, but the safety of each and every citizen in our community. As a city council, we must always be an advocate for the community and a voice for the people, and we must always ask ourselves if our decisions meet that criteria. I have consistently demonstrated my commitment through my actions as a private citizen. I believe I stand alone when I say that I did not wait until I made the decision to run for city council before attending city council meetings. I have attended every meeting for nearly 5 years. I have attended neighborhood and public meetings throughout the city and have supported numerous fundraisers and events for the benefit of those within and outside of our community. My greatest hope is on Tuesday, November 7th, you, the voters, elect 9 independent-thinking people who, though they may be on the opposite side of an issue and have very different views, are willing to work together for you, the people, the safety and quality of life of the children, and the city of Fall River. My greatest dream is that you consider me when you cast your vote and allow me the opportunity to serve you.
Thank you. Track Joseph Ali.
Thank you, FRC Media, for having me here. Thank you, Herald News, for having me here as well. I just wanted to just let people know who I am. Born and raised in Fall River, elementary school, middle school, high school, joined the military back in 1998, stayed in there for 9 years, came back to Fall River around 2009, had to take care of some family business, and then once everything was squared away, really started to pay attention to the politics in the city, paid attention to the recall, attended all the meetings, participated in numerous different charity events around the city and cleanups and everything else like that. I feel like I have a real honest and pure passion for the city, and everything that you see me do as a city councilor, if I ever get elected, if you will elect me as your city councilor, everything I do is going to reflect that passion. It's going to reflect that fairness. It's going to reflect everything that I am as a person. I'm going to put it all out there for you. I care about the safety of our community. I care about connecting with our community, and I have a fundamental belief that the government should not be after your funds. So every single thing that I do is always going to be connected to taking the burden off of you. I've done that in my own campaign. I don't take any kind of money donations. This is my second campaign running. I plan on doing that in the future. Elect me, and you will have a dedicated city councilor. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Long.
The role of a city council is to counsel our mayor and city leaders. I've established open lines of communication with our mayor, fire chief, our acting police chief, as well as department heads at City Hall, other elected officials, and our veterans. If re-elected, I will continue to build on those relationships, and I look forward to the discussion about the city my family has called home for over 8 generations. I believe courageous leadership, uninhibited by political posturing, will continue to move this city forward. I want to continue to be part of that dialogue. Politics aside, we need to keep our city clean, safe, and attractive. This is a fundamental requirement of government. I've helped to rebuild our fire and police departments, which has increased morale and reestablished our public safety officials as one of the finest in the state. I'm proud of these men and women, and I'm honored by their support. I have supported and will continue to support increased funding for our schools, rebuilding the infrastructure, and supporting our school committee in their efforts to bring a first-class education to the greatest resource this city has, our children. I've supported the largest investment in our city's infrastructure, from streets and sidewalk improvements, streetscapes, water and sewer improvements, the realignment of our city's finance through zero-based budgeting. As your city councilor, and with the efforts of every city department head, we turned the corner by bringing the rainy day fund from the brink of disaster to a healthy $4.5 million in free cash and a healthy bond rating. Tonight, I humbly request your continued support, your prayers, and your vote on November 7th, 2017. Vote for the city of Fall River. Vote and re-elect Stephen R. Long as your city councilor. Thank you.
Thank you. Leo Pelletier.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the panel and you, Mr. Tebow, for putting this together. You know, 28 years, a lot of things go by, and let me tell you, I put my heart and soul in anything I've done for the council, whether it be a big issue, small issue, the little lady on the corner, the candy store, who cares? You call me, I'll take care of it. I was involved with the CSOs, the water relining, the new school, the police station, fire station, waterfront ordinance to make it easier to put a business there, and the bike path as well. I've worked with 7 mayors and never had too many problems, small problems. So why can't I work with 8 councilors and not bicker with them guys? I want to try to get along if I'm elected. I tell it like it is, I use common sense, and I ask the people of Fall River to re-elect Leo Pelletier. Let's bring Leo back. Thank you.
Thank you. Ronald Cabral.
I want to thank Fall River Community Media and the Herald News sponsors this debate. Give me an opportunity. I care about the city, and I want to represent you as the next city council. Public safety, education, economic development. We answered a lot of questions tonight, and I want to thank my colleagues who have participated tonight. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves, represent my city and yours. I especially ask for your vote on November 7, 2017. Tell your family and friends to vote Cabral on Election Day. In a few weeks of the city, we'll choose new councilors or keep the same. I'm a lifelong resident of the North End, graduate from Durfee, and attended here at Bristol Community College. I'm only one voice and 9 elected officials. I'm going to work with the administration and my colleagues, and I'm ready for the leadership to lead my city, and I'm proud of. I hope I earn your vote on November 7, 2017.
Thank you. I want to again thank the candidates and the panelists for participating tonight. I'd also like to thank our FRC Media staff here this evening, Stephen Rice, Lucy Cabral, Denise Pumaguaye, and Sean Elliott from Bristol Community College, who helps operate the Jackson Arts Center here in Fall River. You can watch a replay of this forum and find out more information about all the candidates and the issues in this year's campaign by tuning into FRC TV Channel 95 and also our websites, frmedia.org and frcmedianews.org. We also ask you to join us on election night, November 7th, as we partner with our colleagues at FRG TV to provide live coverage of the election results. I'm Keith Tebow. Have a good night.